The door of the Hells Angels clubhouse creaked open, letting in a rush of cold January air. Smoke hung thick from the fading cigarette burns in the corners, and the faint metallic scent of motorcycles lingered. Inside, a group of leather-clad men lounged on worn couches, their tattoos catching the dim light as they laughed, spoke loudly, and tested the limits of the room's unique hierarchy. Then came Steve McQueen. Not loud, not flashy, but with a quiet authority that immediately drew every eye. His leather jacket looked ordinary, yet somehow every head turned. He walked in like he owned the room, but it wasn't arrogance, it was confidence. Behind him followed a man who seemed out of place. Simple clothes, calm eyes, measured steps. Some of the men chuckled under their breath, clearly judging him. Who's this little guy tagging along? Bruce Lee didn't flinch. He didn't try to explain or impress. He simply moved with a quiet grace that contrasted sharply with the raw energy around him. The air seemed to shift imperceptibly as he crossed the room. Those who had been laughing started glancing at each other, sensing something they couldn't quite name. Then it happened. One of the more outspoken members smirked, leaning forward. "Hey man, you lost or just looking for trouble?" The words were meant to provoke, meant to humiliate. Some members laughed. Others paused, sensing the tension building like static before a storm. Steve McQueen didn't intervene. He just smiled faintly, a knowing glint in his eyes. Bruce Lee remained still. Not a muscle twitch in anger, not a hand moved toward defense. Just silence. The room noticed. The laughter faded, replaced unique whispers. Even in that dimly lit, chaotic clubhouse, Bruce Lee's presence seemed to carry weight no one had expected. The tension was almost unbearable. Every glance, every movement, every heartbeat of the men in the room amplified the unspoken question, who is this man? And what happens next? The camera would linger on the small smirk forming on McQueen's face, the calm determination in Bruce Lee's eyes, and the uncertain glances of the Hells Angels members. The promise hung in the air, something was about to happen that none of them, or anyone watching, would ever forget. The clubhouse was more than just a gathering place, it was a fortress of unspoken rules, tradition, and reputation. Leather jackets, worn boots, and faded tattoos told stories of decades lived on the edge. Motorcycles lined the walls, each one polished and customized, a statement of pride and identity. The hum of engines outside could still be heard faintly, a reminder of the world beyond, but inside, time moved differently. Here, respect was earned, hierarchy mattered, and appearances often decided your fate. Steve McQueen moved with ease. His presence didn't demand attention, it commanded it. Every member who glanced his way instinctively straightened, acknowledged him with subtle nods, or averted their eyes. It wasn't celebrity worship, it was recognition of someone who belonged. Behind him, Bruce Lee remained composed, quiet, almost invisible to anyone not paying close attention. Yet there was an unmistakable aura about him, the calm intensity that hinted at hidden power. The members of the clubhouse were a mix of characters. Some lounged lazily, smoking, playing cards, or drinking from bottles of whiskey. Others were more active, checking motorcycles, chatting in low voices, or sizing up newcomers with sharp, calculating eyes. Every glance, every gesture, carried weight. This was a place where mistakes could be costly, where one misstep might earn punch or permanent mark on your reputation. As Bruce and Steve walked further inside, whispers began to ripple through the room. "Who's the guy with McQueen?" one member muttered under his breath. "Doesn't look like much." Another laughed quietly. "Maybe he's just a fan, thinking he can hang with the legends." The words were meant to provoke, but the effect was different than intended. Something about Bruce's posture, his steady gaze, and the way he didn't react to their judgment created subtle tension that even the boldest members felt in their stomachs. The contrast was striking. Steve McQueen, famous, confident, effortlessly respected, moved through the room like natural extension of the environment. Bruce Lee, dressed simply, seemed almost fragile at first glance, but every movement, every breath, suggested something entirely different. The room's hierarchy was clear, respect was bought through deeds, skill, and courage. And silently, almost imperceptibly, Bruce Lee began earning it, not with words, but Eli simply existing, calm and unshaken, in the midst of men trained to notice weakness instantly. A few members tried small tests. One leaned over a table, staring directly at Bruce, smirking. "So, you really think you belong here?" Another tapped his glass, deliberately spilling a bit of whiskey near Bruce's shoes. The room was tense, waiting for a reaction, expecting anger or humiliation. Most would have snapped. Most would have shown some sign of weakness. But Bruce remained unmoved, eyes steady, breathing controlled, posture impeccable. Silence stretched across the room, thick and heavy, like drawn curtain in the middle of a performance. Steve McQueen noticed. He didn't interfere, didn't speak, but a faint smile played across his face. He knew what was coming. Bruce Lee didn't need to prove anything verbally. The room was already noticing the shift, how the simple man walking behind McQueen commanded attention without demanding it. Every sensory detail added to the tension. The smell of smoke and leather, mixed with the faint scent of whiskey and gasoline, filled the air. The sound of motorcycles idling outside added a rhythmic undertone, almost like a countdown. The dim lighting cast shadows across the members' faces, highlighting expressions of curiosity, doubt, and growing unease. The whisper spread further. "Did you see him just now?" one member said. "He didn't even flinch." Another nodded slowly. "Something's off about this guy." Eyes that had been sharp with judgment now tracked him with caution. Bruce Lee had not moved aggressively, had not challenged anyone, but the power of his presence alone began to alter the room's dynamics. It was here, in this tense juxtaposition of toneness, reputation, and expectation, that the stage was fully set. The contrast between appearance and reality, between arrogance and genuine skill, was palpable. The audience, those watching the story unfold, felt the suspense. Something extraordinary was about to happen. The room had been established, the players introduced, and the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. And through it all, Bruce Lee remained calm. A quiet storm in the middle of chaos, unnoticed Eli many but observed Eli all who mattered. The groundwork for conflict, confrontation, and ultimate revelation was laid meticulously. Every member, every glance, every subtle movement hinted at what was coming, a moment where skill, composure, and respect would collide, and nothing would ever be the same again. The stage was ready. The players were in place. And for anyone watching, the unspoken promise lingered. What happens next inside this room was never meant to be seen, but would leave everyone breathless when it did. The room's tension was palpable. Every laugh, every shuffle of chairs, every clink of a bottle on a wooden table seemed louder than usual, magnified the uncertainty hanging in the air. The Hells Angels members were seasoned, tough, and rarely impressed. But something about the calm man following Steve McQueen unsettled them. It wasn't arrogance. It wasn't aggression. It was presence. One of the younger, more outspoken members, a tall man with a sleeve of tattoos crawling up his arms, leaned forward. His leather jacket creaked as he shifted in his chair. "So who's this guy with you, Steve?" he said, voice dripping with mockery. The question was simple, but the tone carried challenge. Some of the surrounding men snickered, expecting a quick retort or nervous reaction from Bruce Lee. Bruce didn't answer. He didn't flinch. He didn't even glance directly at the man. Instead, he kept his posture straight, his hands relaxed at his sides, eyes calmly surveying the room. This wasn't ignorance, it was control. Every breath, every micro-movement communicated quiet confidence. And slowly, members started to notice. The tall man laughed, a low, sarcastic sound, and nudged the table with his boot, spilling a little whiskey near Bruce's shoes. "Careful there, buddy," he said, smirking. "Don't want you ruining the floor. You sure you belong here?" Some members chuckled, others whispered among themselves, sizing up the tension. Another member, shorter but wary, joined in, circling around Bruce like a predator. "Yeah," he said, leaning close enough for Bruce to hear. Not exactly what expected from the guy Steve brought in. "You looking for trouble, or just here to watch?" His tone was mocking but measured. He knew instinctively that Bruce was not like anyone else in the room. Still, Bruce remained still. His face revealed nothing. No anger, no irritation, no hint of reaction. It was as if the room itself paused, uncertain how to proceed. The members who had been mocking him began exchanging uneasy glances. A few leaned back, their confidence faltering. Something about this calm, deliberate presence made them question their assumptions. Steve McQueen watched quietly, arms crossed, a faint smile tugging at his lips. He didn't intervene, didn't warn the others. His subtle gaze communicated a message only Bruce could hear: handle this your way. And Bruce did, Eli not responding. The whisper spread like wildfire. Did you see that? Someone muttered. He didn't even flinch. Another member nodded slowly, suspicion creeping into his eyes. There's something about this guy, you can feel it. The humor and arrogance that had filled the room moments earlier were fading, replaced Eli caution and curiosity. The instigators tried one more tactic. A member leaned in, flexing his arms and smirking. Simon, show us what you got, don't just stand there looking like a statue. The challenge hung in the air. Bruce's eyes flicked briefly toward the man, sharp but calm, and then returned to the room at large. No words, no gestures, no sudden movements. The silence was deafening. Slowly, the room began to shift. The men who had mocked him first began to feel a creeping sense of unease. The younger ones, full of bravado, realized that this man's calm was not weakness, it was authority. It was control. And the others, watching quietly, began to sense that a storm was building, even if no one had yet seen it. Every small action, the tapping of a glass, the shifting of chairs, the whisper of a leader's sleeve, added to the mounting suspense. Bruce Lee's stillness became the focal point, the silent epicenter of the room's collective attention. Every mocking word, every laugh, now felt charged with risk. Even the seasoned veterans felt it, misjudging this man could be costly. And in that moment, the stage was set. The villain, the outspoken member testing Bruce, had revealed his arrogance, his lack of perception, and his underestimation of the newcomer. Bruce Lee, Eli contrast, had revealed nothing except that he was in complete control, calm, and untouchable. Eli petty insults. The camera would linger on the tense standoff, capturing every smirk, every shift in posture, every flicker of doubt in the room. And for the audience, the anticipation would build to a nearly unbearable pitch. When Bruce decides to respond, or when the inevitable reveal happens, the impact will be unforgettable. The room had shifted. What began as casual mockery and laughter had given way to a tense stillness. The Hells Angels members, accustomed to asserting dominance, sizing up strangers, and testing newcomers, were now watching Bruce Lee with a mix of fascination and unease. The air itself seemed heavier, charged with anticipation, as if the walls had absorbed the quiet intensity he radiated. Bruce Lee stood perfectly still, his posture relaxed yet precise, every line of his body composed and deliberate. His hands hung loosely at his sides, his eyes calm but alert, scanning the room without fixating on any one person. To the casual observer, he seemed ordinary, even unimposing. But to those paying attention, the ones who had begun to sense the subtle shift in energy, he was extraordinary. Every micro-movement, every controlled breath, spoke of mastery and discipline that could not be faked. Steve McQueen noticed the effect immediately. He didn't need to intervene, his slight nod, almost imperceptible, acknowledged that Bruce's presence alone was already rewriting the room's hierarchy. The young, brash members who had challenged Bruce moments ago now hesitated. Their bravado faltered. Their laughter had died out. The calm, measured aura emanating from Bruce Lee made them question not only their assumptions about him, but about themselves. One of the original instigators, the tall tattooed man, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. He tried to force a laugh, a feeble attempt to regain control, but it fell flat. Every attempt at provocation bounced harmlessly off Bruce's composed exterior. It was not ignorance. It was not fear. It was control. And control, in that room, was more powerful than aggression. Even the senior members, who had initially remained silent, began to exchange glances. The subtle power dynamics had shifted without a single word. Bruce's calm was not passive, it was dominant. The room's energy, once chaotic and brash, now revolved around him, as if he were the quiet center of a storm no one could predict or resist. Small details made the difference. The way he shifted his weight slightly, the way his eyes scanned the room without panic, the faint rise and fall of his chest with each measured breath, all communicated a message that no one could ignore. He was aware, he was prepared, and he was unshakable. The members had expected anger, defensive posture, maybe even a fight. Instead, they found something far more unsettling: total control. Whispers began to circulate. "Did you see him?" one member muttered. "He didn't even blink." Another added quietly, "Something about him, you can feel it, it's like he's in charge," without saying a word. The word spread, creating ripples of doubt and unease across the room. The young instigators' confidence continued to wane. Their jokes no longer landed. Their smirks faded. The room had learned, almost instinctively, that Bruce Lee was not ordinary. Steve McQueen watched with a faint, knowing smile. He understood the silent strategy, the power of composure, the weight of presence. He had seen Bruce in action before, and he knew that this calm, controlled silence was far more intimidating than any outburst, any show of aggression. The young members did not yet know it, but their assumptions were about to be shattered completely. Time seemed to slow. Every glance, every shuffled foot, every nervous cough became exaggerated, magnified the anticipation in the room. The members were prisoners of their own curiosity and Bruce Lee's quiet command. Nothing had happened yet, no punch, no demonstration, no loud confrontation, but the tension was electric. The room hung on the edge of an invisible cliff, every heartbeat amplified, every breath measured, as if the atmosphere itself awaited the inevitable. And Bruce remained calm. Not smug, not reactive, not defensive. Just calm. Dominant in his stillness, unflinching, aware of every challenge, every judgment, every intention directed at him. His silent power had transformed the room from chaos into an arena of psychological tension. The instigators were no longer the aggressors, they were observers of a force they did not understand. For the audience watching, the effect was profound. The anticipation grew almost unbearable. This was the moment where power, control, and respect were communicated without words, without violence, without spectacle. Every viewer could feel the weight of Bruce Lee's presence, and every moment of stillness built toward a payoff that promised to be unforgettable. The stage was set. The villain had been introduced, tension had reached its peak, and Bruce Lee's silent mastery had taken control of the room. Every glance, every whisper, every subtle movement hinted at the coming confrontation, the reveal of true skill, respect, and authority. And through it all, Bruce Lee remained unmoved, calm, and unshakable, the silent storm at the center of a world that did not yet understand him. The atmosphere in the Hells Angels clubhouse had shifted completely. What started as casual laughter and bravado had given way to charged silence. Bruce Lee's calm demeanor was no longer quiet curiosity, it was now the center of attention. Every member of the room felt it, even the most seasoned, tattooed veterans who prided themselves on toughness sensed the subtle, undeniable authority radiating from him. The tall instigator, the one who had first mocked Bruce, sat frozen. His smirk had vanished. He shifted uncomfortably in his chair, eyes darting briefly to the others around him, searching for reassurance. But there was none. Every glance he received reflected the same dawning realization: Bruce Lee was not ordinary. The younger members who had laughed at his simple appearance were now whispering nervously among themselves, their bravado fading like smoke in the cold air. Bruce's silence did more than command respect, it magnified it. His eyes scanned the room, steady and deliberate, acknowledging no one directly, but taking in everything. The smallest gestures were noted, a twitch of a hand, a subtle shift in posture, the nervous tapping of a boot on the wooden floor. Each member felt exposed under his calm observation. They had tested him. They had mocked him. And now, they were the ones being measured. Steve McQueen, leaning casually against a wall, watched with an approving smile. He knew that Bruce's presence alone would do what no words or threats could. McQueen's subtle nods to the camera would later reveal that he understood this was a lesson in power, composure, and respect, an unspoken demonstration of how true mastery transcends ego. Whispers continued to ripple through the room. "Did you see how calm he is?" one member muttered, voice barely above a breath. "He doesn't even react." Another nodded, swallowing nervously. It's like he's not even here, and yet he owns this place." The word spread quickly, creating an undercurrent of awe. For the first time, the instigators were aware that their judgments, their arrogance, were being quietly dismantled. Some of the senior members, who had initially observed in silence, now shifted their seats to get better view. They were veteran observers of human behavior, men who had seen countless fights, challenges, and confrontations. And yet, Bruce Lee's presence commanded their full attention. There was no aggression in his stance, no threat in his movement, but the energy he radiated demanded acknowledgement. A subtle incident highlighted this shift. One of the younger members, attempting to regain some control, dropped chair near Bruce's feet. The clatter echoed through the room. The man expected Bruce to flinch, to respond, to show some sign of irritation. But Bruce remained perfectly still. Not a twitch, not a flinch, not a word. The room held its collective breath, and the man's own confidence faltered under the weight of the silence. Slowly, the whispers turned into cautious conversation. "You can feel it, right?" one member asked another. "It's like he's in control, without even trying." The comment was tentative, almost incredulous. Others nodded, acknowledging it quietly. Their earlier bravado replaced growing respect. Every member in the room, even the most skeptical, began to sense that Bruce Lee's calm was more dangerous than any physical challenge they could have thrown at him. Time seemed to stretch in that moment. Every glance, every movement, every subtle shift in posture took on enormous significance. The tension was not just about potential violence, it was psychological. Bruce Lee had inverted the power dynamic. Those who had tried to assert dominance over him now felt exposed, uncertain, and subtly afraid. The audience, watching this unfold, could feel the weight of every heartbeat, every whispered word, every cautious glance. And yet, Bruce never moved aggressively, never raised his voice, never responded to provocation. The contrast was striking. Here were men trained to respect strength, skill, and audacity, and yet they found themselves questioning everything simply because one man remained perfectly calm. His silent power had become the focal point, and the room, once chaotic and brash, now orbited around him. Even minor gestures were magnified. A slight nod from a veteran member, a shift of eyes among the instigators, the subtle leaning forward of onlookers, all communicated that something extraordinary was happening. Bruce Lee's presence had transformed the room into a theater of suspense, where every movement and every pause carried meaning. The tension, now thick and almost tangible, had reached a point where everyone in the room, and the audience watching, knew that the climax, the reveal, was imminent. It was in this charged atmosphere that the stage was fully prepared for the next moment, the revelation that would change the balance of respect entirely. The whispers, the glances, the heightened awareness of every member set the perfect conditions for the emotional payoff to come. Bruce Lee's silent dominance had shifted the room from mockery to awe, from arrogance to anticipation. And all it had taken was presence, calm, and complete control. The audience watching felt it too, the suspense, the uncertainty, the awe. They knew the payoff was coming. And when it arrived, it would be unforgettable. The room had been transformed. The earlier chaos of laughter, mocking, and arrogance had given way to an almost reverent tension. Every member of the Hells Angels clubhouse was acutely aware of Bruce Lee's presence. The instigators, the skeptics, even the veterans who had been observing quietly, none of them could deny the quiet authority he carried. What had started as a casual intrusion into their world had become demonstration of mastery that was impossible to ignore. Then came the moment that would leave everyone in the room, and the audience watching, speechless. Senior member, the chapter president himself, had been watching quietly from the corner, his arms crossed, expression unreadable. He had observed Bruce Lee's calm, precise movements, the way he had handled every subtle provocation without a word. His eyes narrowed thoughtfully, recognizing the unmistakable presence of a man who was far beyond ordinary skill. "Hold on a second," he said, his voice calm but carrying undeniable authority. He stepped forward, causing the room to fall even quieter. The younger members instinctively straightened, sensing that something important was about to happen. Every eye followed him, the silence stretching with anticipation. He approached Bruce Lee, studied him for a long moment, and then spoke, "You." Bruce Lee. His voice carried disbelief, admiration, and the instant respect that came with recognizing someone who had earned it through pure mastery. The effect was immediate. The tall instigator, who had first mocked Bruce, froze mid-motion. His smirk had vanished entirely. The air seemed to tighten around him as realization struck. He had underestimated the man standing before him. The whispering ripples across the room grew louder, but now they carried awe instead of mockery. Steve McQueen, leaning casually against a wall, let a small smile play across his lips. He had known all along, and his subtle approval confirmed that Bruce Lee's silent strategy had worked perfectly. The room had already shifted, now it was no longer about confrontation or ego. It was about acknowledgement, about understanding the difference between appearance and reality, and about giving respect where it was due. Bruce Lee finally spoke, his voice calm, measured, and deliberate. Respect is not demanded. It is observed, understood, and given freely when it is earned, he said. His words, though soft, carried the weight of truth and experience. Every member of the clubhouse felt the impact, mixture of humility, awe, and a sudden understanding of the lesson he had demonstrated without even raising his voice. The chapter president extended his hand and Bruce shook it firmly. The simple gesture reverberated through the room. The young instigators, who had tested him earlier, now avoided direct eye contact, feeling both embarrassment and admiration. Others in the room whispered quietly to one another, acknowledging that they had witnessed something extraordinary. Even those who had initially doubted him now recognized that Bruce Lee was in a class of his own. A subtle transformation occurred. The energy in the room, once chaotic and brash, shifted into shared respect for mastery, composure, and control. Members began to discuss quietly among themselves, recounting Bruce's calmness, his precision, and his ability to dominate the room psychologically without aggression. The lessons they had been forced to observe, discipline, confidence, and the power of silent authority, were palpable. Steve McQueen finally spoke, his voice carrying just enough humor to ease the tension. Sometimes, the quietest man in the room is the one you need to watch the most. His words drew a small laugh, but everyone in the room understood the deeper truth behind them. Bruce Lee's presence had not only earned respect, it had altered the very fabric of the clubhouse dynamics. As the camera lingered on the faces of the Hells Angels members, it was clear that their perception of power, authority, and skill had been forever changed. The instigators had learned humility. The spectators had learned awe. And the audience watching at home felt the full weight of the revelation. Respect is not about appearance, words, or intimidation, it is about mastery, composure, and the quiet confidence to command without demand. The final moment of part anim captured the silent acknowledgement between Bruce Lee and Steve McQueen. Nod, subtle but loaded with meaning, conveyed what words never could. The mission was complete. Bruce had earned the room's respect. The audience, feeling the tension release, experienced a cathartic payoff, the climax of suspense, skill, and emotional resonance. The stage was set for the final part, the moral lesson and reflection that would leave viewers inspired and eager for more stories. The reveal had been made. Respect had been earned. And the story, now etched in the minds of everyone present, had reached a moment of unforgettable impact. The room, once alive with laughter, mockery, and challenge, had transformed into a place of quiet reflection. Bruce Lee's presence, calm and unshakable, had shifted the energy entirely. What began as tension and confrontation had become a profound lesson in respect, composure, and perception. The Hells Angels members, raw, rugged, and seasoned, now looked at each other in awe, realizing that true power had nothing to do with appearances, boasting, or intimidation. Bruce Lee's eyes scanned the room one final time, calm but piercing. "You don't need to shout to show strength," he said softly, his voice carrying authority without aggression. "True mastery is measured not by how loud you are, but by how steady you remain when everything around you is chaotic." Every member in the room felt the weight of those words. Even the instigators, who had earlier mocked him and tested his composure, now understood their lesson. The room's hierarchy had shifted, not through force, but through demonstration of inner discipline and confidence. Steve McQueen stepped forward, placing a reassuring hand on Bruce's shoulder. "Sometimes the quietest person in the room commands the most attention," he said. The words, simple yet profound, reinforced the lesson. Arrogance and ego are temporary, but respect earned through skill, control, and integrity endures. The young members who had tried to provoke Bruce now looked at him differently. They understood that judging someone's appearance alone was a form of weakness, and they felt the humility that comes from being shown the error of their assumptions. The atmosphere remained charged with reflection. Members began quietly discussing what they had witnessed, the subtle gestures, the unwavering posture, the calm yet dominant presence that had commanded attention without raising a fist. Each observation reinforced the idea that strength is not always loud, and authority does not require aggression. Bruce Lee had turned the room into living demonstration of principles that extended far beyond physical skill. In that moment, the audience watching the video could feel the broader significance. This was not merely a story about one man entering a room of tall, intimidating figures. It was a lesson in life, how to command respect, how to navigate judgment, and how to demonstrate mastery without ego. Bruce Lee's approach had shifted the entire dynamic, creating a ripple effect that changed perceptions permanently. Even Steve McQueen, whose reputation was legendary in its own right, seemed to acknowledge the rarity of the moment. His subtle smile and quiet approval spoke volumes. The lesson was not just for the members of the clubhouse, but for everyone watching. The demonstration of calm, controlled power, combined with integrity, had left an indelible impression. Bruce Lee added, judging others based on appearances is the weakest form of arrogance. Respect is not demanded, it is observed and given to those who earn it through action, discipline, and composure. The words resonated with every member present. Some nodded quietly, reflecting internally. Others spoke softly among themselves, acknowledging that they had learned something invaluable. The room had become a classroom without walls, and Bruce Lee, through presence alone, had been the teacher. The chapter president approached Bruce Lee once more, this time with a subtle nod of reverence and gratitude. "Thank you for showing us the way," he said. The gesture, though small, carried immense weight. Respect had been earned, lessons had been taught, and the environment had been transformed. The instigators, humbled and aware of their own misjudgment, quietly acknowledged the truth of what had happened. Steve McQueen turned slightly toward the camera, a small smirk on his face. "Remember this," he said. "Power isn't measured by noise, threats, or appearances. It's measured by control, calm, and the ability to inspire respect without demanding it." The audience watching felt the clarity of the message. The suspense, the tension, and the eventual reveal all led to this universal lesson, one that could be applied far beyond the walls of a clubhouse. As the camera lingered on Bruce Lee and Steve McQueen walking toward the exit, the Hells Angels members returned to their normal activities, but nothing would ever be the same. The lesson was clear: true mastery commands respect, silence can be more powerful than aggression, and integrity is the strongest form of influence. The final moment of the video invited reflection for the audience at home. Which part of Bruce Lee's approach surprised you the most? Narrator might ask. Share your thoughts and experiences below, and stay tuned for more stories of extraordinary mastery and lessons from the world's most remarkable figures. The invitation to engage extended the experience, leaving viewers inspired, reflective, and eager for more. And with that, the story concluded, not with chaos or violence, but with a quiet, unforgettable demonstration of power, presence, and respect. The Hells Angels Clubhouse had been a stage, Bruce Lee the teacher, and the lesson was one that would resonate far beyond that room. The audience, having witnessed the full hours of suspense, tension, and revelation, was left inspired, motivated, and eager to apply the principles they had observed in their own lives.